What is up, people? Van from the Vanderverse Gaming Channel here, bringing another video on Solasta, Crown of the Magister. In today's video, I want to talk about party composition and how to build a perfect party. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying there's no such thing as a perfect party, but I do want to provide you with some ideas on, if you're new to the game, some great party combinations that will really help you, and also just some fun party combinations that might be something you'd want to do. So what I'd like to do is kind of talk about what each class brings to a party and kind of classify them, and then give you my opinion of some of the great party combinations that I've liked to use, that I've beaten the game on Iron Man mode, etc. with. So with that being said, let's kind of dive into it. Now, in 5th edition D&D tabletop, you have the luxury of having a DM who's on the other side of the table, who, depending on how you formulate your party composition, can modify the campaign to account for some of the things you're lacking, right? They can account for the lack of a rogue, or they can account for the lack of a healer, or they account for the lack of a true tank. But in this game, the campaign is what the campaign is, and so if you don't pick a decent party, there's going to be encounters that are just going to face roll you, because the assumption is you have a balanced party. Now, you can play this game with any kind of party you want, but you just have to keep in mind how that's going to hinder you and what you have to do to compensate for the lack of the party member. So let's first talk about the different classes and what they contribute into what we like to call the 4 buckets, right? So you have kind of the defender role, you have the striker role, you have the controller role, and you have like the leader role. This was 4th edition kind of roles. In 1 D&D, now they're going to the expertise, the mages, the priests, and the warriors. Very similar. So which classes fall into which roles? So let's talk about the striker role. The barbarian is a melee DPS. They provide great melee DPS, so they fit very well into the striker role. Another class that fits very well into the striker role is your fighter. The fighter is going to either be your tanky role, or he's also going to be your DPS striker role. The monk is also another great class that fits into the striker role. The paladin, the ranger, the rogue, and any spellcaster can fit into a striker role, which is that DPS, whether it's going to be melee DPS, range DPS, magic DPS. Any one of these are going to be your damage dealer, and you want to have one of them in your party. The second class that you want to build into your party is kind of your meat shield, the tank. The guy that you throw up front that's going to take all of the brunt. And that's going to be usually a barbarian. Barbarians lack armor, but they make up for it in resistances and hit points. So certain subclasses in the barbarian make for amazing tanks, but barbarians in general make for great tanks because they can just take damage. Clerics, amazing as it is, some clerics can fit, literally the cleric can fit any role. They can be a leader, they can be a controller, they can be a tank, they can be a DPS. They are pretty much the jack of all trades. But for the most part, a barbarian, a fighter, or a paladin are really going to fit that tanky role, right? The guy who's going to be either heavily armored or heavily hit point to suck up the damage and be the guy up front that you want everyone to target, to take away from some of your DPS or your squishies. So keep that in mind. Now, there are other classes that can get there. The cleric can get pretty good as a tank. The rogue, with the new hoodlum subclass, can get pretty good. The monk actually isn't a terrible tank because of their natural AC, similar to a barbarian. They can actually get like a 23 AC just by having dexterity certain high and their wisdom at a certain point. But I would recommend barbarian, fighter, paladin are going to be the 3 classes that you're going to want to take on that tank defender party member. Then when you get into the controller, right? This is the person that is controlling the battlefield. This is the person that's going to be debuffing the enemy, going to be buffing the party, and going to be just making things miserable for everything. The great classes that fit into this are really the druid, the bard, the wizard, And I would probably say you could argue cleric, warlock, sorcerer, but ultimately the wizard, the druid, the bard are the three strongest controllers in my mind. They provide a lot of buffs. The cleric is also a controller as well, because like I said, they can do everything. But these classes can provide a lot of buffs to your team with bless or with bane on the enemy. You know, spike growth or entangle or sleet storm or fear or charm or all of these different things. Bardic inspiration. So picking one of these to put into your party is always something really nice to have because they fill that role. And then also from a leadership role, this is the character that's going to kind of be the healer, the one that's kind of the face of the party, the one that's kind of leading the group kind of idea. To me, the bard, the cleric, and the druid are the three that fit this role, right? You could argue a paladin could fit in there. You could argue, you know, some other classes, but ultimately the cleric, the druid, and the the cleric, the druid, and the bard are very well going to be the leaders of the party. They're going to be the ones that are doing all the healing. They're going to be the ones that are able to control kind of what's going on. And so I really think that having one of those in your party makes sense. So if we dissect that and we say, okay, I'm new to the game, what is a good party combination? The basic party combination in Solasta that you actually can unlock an achievement for is the standard fighter, cleric, wizard, rogue. You cannot go wrong with this. And the reason being is each one of these provides one of those four things that add to what you're trying to achieve. You got your leader in the cleric, you got your defender in the fighter, you got your striker in the rogue, and you got your controller in the wizard, right? And all of these kind of fit into that, what we just talked about. So that is the base party. If you want to have a strong, well-rounded party to start with, those are the four. Just if you pick them, you're going to have a great time. Now, each one of these classes also fill a role in the game that's a little bit more specific and unique that you won't actually get. So, for example, the wizard. The reason why I always play with a wizard in my party is because they get the ability to cast Identify and the ability to cast Detect Magic as a ritual spell for free. And the reason it makes it special on a wizard is you do not have to memorize or study or whatever word you want to use, prepare a ritual spell to be able to cast it. So this gives a person in your party the ability to identify and detect all of your magical items without having to pay a fee for it, without having to utilize a spell slot to keep those prepared, and without having to burn a spell slot to do it. And so, to me, playing with a wizard is almost something I like to do. And to be quite honest, a sorcerer is not a good enough replacement for a wizard, in my opinion, in Solasta. Neither would a warlock be. The closest you can get to a wizard replacement, in my opinion, is the bard. The bard also has the ability to have ritual casting with the ability to do Identify and Detect Magic. They also have the ability to do a lot of the spell casting with their, the lore bard, because you can get magical secrets. And so that is kind of what I would suggest is if you're building a party, having a bard or a wizard, I feel makes the game easier just with the ability to not have to spend spell slots to detect magic and to do the ritual casting. So that's that. The bard is the only other class in the game that can use Identify other than the wizard, so keep that in mind. Now, there are Identify, wands, there are Identify scrolls, so everything I'm telling you here is also able to be purchased in the game. So it's not like it's a deal breaker if you don't do this. I just prefer to do this to make my life easier. The next thing I want to kind of talk about is the ability to resurrect. Now, in 5th edition D&D, there's only certain classes that can cast the Revivify and Resurrection spells, okay? So in most games, if you die, you start at your last save point. But if you have the ability to resurrect somebody, you don't have to start and you can bring someone back to life. The problem is not every single class is proficient in those silly revive scrolls. So unless you're a bard, a cleric, or a paladin, or I think a ranger, you can't cast the spell. I don't even think rangers can do it, to be honest with you. And so making sure that you have a party member or two that have the ability to revive is really important, so you don't have to start all over. You can complete the combat and then pick up that person. If you don't, and any one of your people die, they're gone forever and you start all over. So just keep that in mind when it comes to casting the Revivify spell scroll. They give you tons of them, but if you don't have a party member who can utilize it, you can't cast it anyways and you're screwed. Now, in the game, they do give you a crown that gives you the ability to cast Revivify, which helps you for a portion of the game. But there is a point where you lose that and you can't utilize it anymore, so just keep that in mind. The next thing that I want to point out when you're building your class or your party is the ability to open locks. Now, the ranger and the rogue can both do very well with this. Actually, what I like to do is give every single person in my party that has a dexterity that's decent a lockpick set and give them all a chance. All 4 of them can try and open locks. But to consider having a person in your party that can detect traps, undo traps, and undo locks is really, really important. And then you can always have a backup caster like a wizard that can just cast knock, or bard, that you're like, okay, I've done all this, so let me just cast knock. But again, knock is a spell slot. You want to utilize your spell slots appropriately, so you don't want to just utilize it to cast your knock spell, because then there might be a time where you can't long rest. So keep that in mind. The other thing I would like to bring in is the ability to do AoE damage. There are certain classes in the game that can do AoE damage that is very important in fighting when you're fighting against other creatures, because normally you're fighting against large packs of creatures. It's really a game of attrition, right? How many guys do they have versus how many guys do you have? And it's really managing actions. If they have 10 guys, they get 10 actions that they can take, and no matter how high your armor class is or how many hit points you get, there's a chance that they're going to roll a 20 and they're going to hit you anyways. So keep in mind, the best way to make things easier is to eliminate actions on the opponent's side by taking out those creatures. The best way to do that is with AoE abilities. And some of the strongest AoE abilities in the game that just wreck are the Druid has spike growth. Now, there are other subclasses that get it, right? The Druid has spike growth, and so does the Ranger down the road. Spike growth is by far one of the most powerful spells, because if you can choke point something and they are a melee, they have to run to you. If they run to you through spike growth, they're going to die before they even get to you. Huge. The other game-changing ability is the Cleric's Spiritual Guardian. The Spirit Guardians is just stupid. It puts a bubble around you, and that allows you to pretty much anything that comes in your bubble does radiant damage, and if they stay in your bubble, they take radiant damage. Super great. The Bard, with their magical secrets, can pick up a lot of these spells from these other classes, so that gives them that ability. There's the Warlock gets the ability in some of their classes called Mind Blast, which it does an AoE, no Mind Twist, does an AoE, which is fantastic. Firewall, any wall spell, the Thorn Wall, the Blade Barrier, Firewall, any of those provide a huge benefit because things have to go in and out of that wall that cause damage. And then, of course, my all-time favorite, Fireball. So when you're picking your classes, you want to make sure that you don't have all melee or single attack or multiple attack damage that's single target. You want to make sure to incorporate into your party classes that have the ability to do AoE damage. So that's another thing that is very important to call out in this game. So that really covers some of the most important aspects of building your party. The one final one that I will say that is my favorite is the ability to create food. So in 5th edition D&D, there are rations. You need a ration per person to take a long rest. Rations weigh a shit ton. I mean, they're like 10 pounds each or something stupid. So you can't walk around with a bunch of rations because they weigh so much. So to have the ability to create food so that you always have food that you can take a long rest and not have to worry about rations is huge in my opinion. So that's another reason to incorporate a druid, a cleric, or a ranger into your party because they have the good berries, they have create food, those kind of things. So that's another dynamic of the game that is just a quality of life similar to having the ability to identify things for free or having the ability to resurrect. All of these things are very important and vital in my decision making and my gameplay that has made me think through who I'm going to put in my party. So with all of that being said, here are some of my examples of my favorite parties to build that I have had success with that I think are amazing. Okay, so first up, one of my favorite classes to play as my defender is the Barbarian. The reason why I like the Barbarian so much is because their damage resistance comes from the ability to reduce damage they take through resistance to the different slashing, bludgeoning, piercing, that kind of thing. In addition, their main reason is their hit points. They have a crap ton of them. And if you have the ability to give them temporary hit points, they make them very strong. At some point in the game, things are going to get so tough that their attack is going to be plus 10, plus 12. And so even if you have an AC of a 25, which is really hard, they're still going to hit you more often than you realize. And so with a Barbarian, it's not about having armor, it's about having the hit points to sustain it. And so when you're reducing half of the damage to you because of your resistances, then you're basically a tank because you're taking half damage. So if you have 100 hit points, you actually have 200 hit points because you're taking half damage. So ultimately, I love playing the Barbarian. And one of my favorite paths to play as a Barbarian is the Path of the Stone. And the reason being is when you're raging, you gain temporary hit points. Your Constitution saving throws are used for any saving throw. You gain a +1 AC for every hostile opponent that can be seen within a cell up to a maximum of 4. And you gain the bonus to add your melee damage, so this doesn't matter. But my point being is if you look at this stone resistance, temporary hit points equal to twice your proficiency bonus. So that's 4 temporary hit points every single turn. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're getting attacked 10 times, that's 40 hit points of damage that you just prevented from taking. In addition, you're probably taking half damage. And in addition, you probably have a crap ton of hit points. So that is why I love putting the Barbarian as my tanky character. And of course, they do some crazy damage. And they can get some pretty decent AC just by having their dexterity and their constitution high, where you're still getting a 20 armor class. And so just all around, if I had to pick a class to be my defender or my tank, I prefer the Barbarian over a fighter or a paladin. The next class that I'm really high on is the Ranger. The Ranger to me in 5th edition D&D always gets a bad rap. But in this game, pound for pound, I feel like they are one of the best characters in the game because of what they have. They have the ability to use Hunter's Mark. They can wear heavy armor. They can wear medium armor, which you can then upgrade to heavy armor. They can do some significant damage. And all around, they have spike growth. They have all of these things that just make them super strong. And my favorite archetype to play is the Swiftblade. I love playing a melee-based Ranger. And the reason being is you can see when you use your dash action, it's made with disadvantage when they try and take an opportunity attack. But the key is you get +2 to your AC when you're wielding 2 weapons, one in each hand. So if you're doing 2 weapons in each hand, you can get some crazy AC with this thing. Then you get this battle focus. This is just crazy from a damage dealing standpoint. This is a free action, okay? Doesn't cost a bonus action, doesn't cost an action, and you can add 2d8 weapon damage to every weapon attack you take this turn. So with this class, you're getting up to 3 and 4 attacks if you're dual wielding. And if you hit, you can add an additional 2d8 damage to those attacks, plus Hunter's Mark, which adds an additional 1d6. All around, this is by far, you can see the extra attack here, and you can see the uncatchable here. This is just by far one of my favorite striker classes to play. So we got a barbarian, we got a ranger. So we're filling the striker role, we're filling the defender role. My next favorite class is going to be the wizard. I love playing the wizard, and my favorite tradition is the court mage. The court mage is probably one of the most powerful freaking subclasses in the game, and it's 100% based on this spell shield. Not to mention, they can take the protection fighting style, which allows them to use a shield. And so if you can imagine, if you take the background, which is sellsword, which gives you medium armor proficiency, and you can use a shield, you have the ability to get up to an 18-20 armor class, and that's before you can cast shield spell, which gives you a +5. So already you're tanky. Then you get the ability to give an ally plus yourself a spell shield that grants them temporary hit points equal to 5 times your proficiency bonus, your level in temporary hit points. So if you can imagine, if you are level 5, you're giving out 25 temporary hit points to you and another member of the team. You can do that twice before each long rest. So you combine that spell shield to that crazy barbarian from earlier, and that dude is just going to wreck people's faces. So amazing ability. Then when you get to level 14, you now can put it on two allies plus yourself. So 3 of your 4 party members can have a spell shield that is going to be equivalent to like 70 hit points. It's just broken. And also you get all the benefits of the wizard that I talked about with your the ability to identify and all that, with your AoE damage. It's just an amazing class. So we got our barbarian as our defender, we got our striker ranger, and then we have our court wizard over here. So now you got to fill that 4th party, which is kind of the leadership party, the healer. This one you can go one of 2 ways in my opinion. You can go cleric or you can go druid. Those are my 2 favorites to go to be my 4th party member. Now I will say, hands down, the cleric is probably the best choice. Spirit Guardians is broken. They have the stupid bonus action to cast that little spirit hammer thing. I forget what it's called. They can heal. They can wear heavy armor, certain classes. It's probably the ultimate choice. I like to go battle cleric, not because of all of this, solely because of this right here, where you can cast spells with a somatic component without a free hand, provided a weapon or shield is being wielded. So basically, you can hold a shield and a weapon in your hand and still cast spells. That is a benefit to have, where a lot of these other caster classes need to have a free hand, so you can't be holding 2 items if you're going to cast spells with somatic component. So you either have to hold a shield, or you have to hold a weapon, or you have to switch between your weapon sets. So having that melee cleric that you can then put heavy armor on, running around the battlefield with a spirit guardian on, healing everybody, taking it in the face, is just that final piece to this amazing puzzle. So with all of that being said, if you want to have my choices of the best 4 classes or subclasses to combine that has gotten me through Iron Man mode in pretty much every single situation, it's that barbarian of the Path of the Stone barbarian combined with this Swift Ranger, the Court Mage Wizard, and the Battle Cleric. Now, I will give some honorable mentions. The Warlock is just amazing. And the reason why I love the Warlock so much is because everything is on a short rest. And so you can always get their abilities back super quick because this is a video game. They can fill in the Ranger position as kind of your striker, your damage dealer, very, very well. They also do a really good job of combining with some of the other abilities that you have in the party. And what I mean by that is if you go cleric and you put in blade barrier, or you go, or even spirit guardians, or you go wizard and you put in wall of fire, or you go druid and you put down spike growth. The warlock's ability with eldritch blast to push creatures back 10 feet, you can actually knock them into those walls so they take extra damage. You can actually knock them out so they have to run back through it to take damage. You can push them through spike growth so they have to come back through the spike growth to take damage. So the knockback effect of a warlock in this game is absolutely amazing, because there's also many areas of the game where if you knock something off, they're dead. They disappear off the map. And there's probably no more fun than pushing things off the map to their death. I mean, laugh out loud hilarious watching them fall to their death. So you can fill in the warlock. If you want to swap out the ranger for the warlock and keep the barbarian cleric wizard, that works out too. The other ones that I would say are good swaps is probably a paladin is a really strong second place to a barbarian. They just do a great job as a tank. They provide a lot of utility, and their damage, if they crit on smites, is just mind-boggling, where you can just delete something. So that's another good replacement to the barbarian that we talked about. So if you're going barbarian, cleric, ranger, wizard, then you can maybe swap out your warlock for your ranger and keep the same party. Or you could do the other thing where you swap the paladin out for the barbarian and the cleric, ranger, wizard, paladin. Very good choices. And then another swap out is the druid for the cleric, like I said. The best druid that I like to play is the Circle of Balance druid. They're pretty much the healing druid, but what makes them so amazing is this Gift of Life, where it says whenever your level 1 or higher spell restores hit points, they regain additional number of hit points equal to your level at the start of their next turn. The key is at the start of their next turn. So what that means is if they are knocked unconscious and at the start of their next turn, you go ahead and they get hit points, okay? So they're laying on the ground, I'm dead. And then their next turn, they just stand up and they're healed. It's amazing. And then they can take their action to run away, to heal themselves, to attack, to whatever. So that's why I would say swapping out this druid, the balanced druid for the cleric, is also an option. So you could go barbarian, druid, ranger, wizard, which is a crazy mix. Honest to God, I hate the sorcerer, so I will never recommend playing the sorcerer. The rogue is fantastic. There are some great rogue subclasses, but to be quite honest, their sneak attack damage really does fall off if you can't get it. They're 100% based on sneak attack damage. And so I just don't think they provide the same consistent damage that you can get with the ranger. And that's why I don't recommend. I feel the ranger is just a better rogue in this game, because they can do everything the rogue can and do more damage, my opinion. Let's talk about the monk. The monk is probably able to fit in where the ranger would. They do a lot of great damage. They have some really good abilities depending on which subclass you pick or which tradition. The Way of the Light puts a little buff on that you can do additional damage, which is nice. The Way of the Survival gives you some bonus AC, so this actually gives you the ability to get a 23 AC to kind of be the tank of the group. But the Way of the Open Hand is really what makes them pretty amazing, because they can do certain things where they can knock them down prone, and they can do other things that are really good to help benefit the party. And then really their other thing that makes them really great is the ability to stun. The monks have the ability to use key points to stun. They get key points equal to their level. So you can try and stun something, up to 16 times depending on how far you take the monk. So that really adds a dynamic that allows them to fit into the ranger's spot where they can do some damage, not as much as a ranger, but enough, and also provide some ability to stun and do things that will make everyone else do more damage. So lastly, we'll talk about the fighter. The fighter can fit in for the barbarian. The fighter can also fit in for the ranger. They can be a striker or they can be your tank. I would say to utilize the game at its fullest, to really experience what it offers from an armor and weapon perspective, you probably want a plate wearing class in your party. That is also why I like to go cleric, so I can put on full plate, because some of the best gear is full plate. And so that's really some reason why I like to put a cleric or a fighter in, or a paladin, or even upgrade a medium armor user to a heavy armor user, just so I can utilize that. And the same goes with weapons. You want to be able to use a plethora of weapons. So you want to make sure you're picking classes that have the ability to use those great two-handed weapons or long swords. And that's why having a fighter or a barbarian or a paladin makes sense. And so you could swap out the fighter for the barbarian, but you could also swap out the fighter for that ranger, that striker role, because if you build them a certain way, they can do some significant damage with their action surge, because it resets on a short rest. And similar to the warlock, you can just keep short resting and keep getting that back, which is a big deal. So that's where I would put the fighter in, right? You go fighter, cleric, ranger, wizard instead, and swap that out. And then lastly, the bard. Where does the bard fit in everything? The bard could fit as a replacement to your cleric. The bard could fit as a replacement to your wizard. And that's probably it. I would never put the bard in as a replacement to your tank. I would never put the bard in as a replacement to your kind of striker role. But they could absolutely fit the leadership role, where you can heal and you can do resurrect and some of that. And they could even fit the controller role a little bit with debuffs and buffs and all that. So that's kind of how I would put that in. So hopefully I didn't ramble too long. Hopefully you understand what I did here, where I take my base of my defender, my controller, my leader, and my striker, and then I start giving you options to swap out for the different things to incorporate it in. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. Hopefully this makes sense, and you guys, this is a good video, and you leave your comments and tell me. So please, if you like it, like it. If you don't, tell me in the comments what I did wrong. I'm always trying to improve my videos. And then stay tuned for all of my videos on Solasta. I have a whole bunch coming now that the last DLC has posted, and the game's not going to change. And so I feel comfortable updating these and making sure they last for the test of time. This is Van from the Vaniverse Gaming Channel. Cheers and peace out.